like Tinder, swipe left or swipe right. Okay, so with this profile here, right? So right now it's 6 seconds. I'm going to count down. Right? Would you keep this profile or would you say no to it? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, time's up. Right. So first of all, right, this person has a nickname, right? Called his Thundercat. Okay, I know this is kind of exaggeration, but I've seen before on resumes, right? People put in their profiles or coding ninja, things like that. Really, really not professional. Yeah, so you want to avoid these things, right? Next, not a very professional email here, right? So make sure that you use a proper email. You can use your NUS email as well. Change it to friendly mode, which means you rename it, right, from alphanumeric to maybe your name. Okay, if not any Gmail, any other kind of platform is fine. Just make sure that the naming is professional. Right, look at the profile picture here, right? So, right, if you do want to include a picture, make sure that it is something professional. Okay, but for Singapore's context, which are they just for Singapore's context, most of the time pictures are not necessary. Right, if it's really for a sales role or things like that, the employer will ask you for it. If not, our advice usually is not to include a picture. But if you do have to, right, make sure it's a professional one. Okay, and that being said, like I said, most of our advice here is for local context. Right, if you're applying for a job in East Asia, let's say Korea, Japan, or China, for such countries, right, a picture is almost necessary. Okay, so just take note that for resume, in terms of tailoring, it has its own cultural and country and industry context as well. Okay. What about something like this, right? So immediately you point out here, what you see here is the result focus, right? The 2 circles that points out. So yes or no, would you keep a resume like this? Right? So quantifiable results help. So in this instance, of course, yes. Okay, so we're going to go through a 4-step process on how you can sharpen your resume. So the first part is to identify skills from the job description, start to list relevant examples from your various life experiences, right? And we're going to touch on this thing called the CAR format, and we're going to go into some detail into it, right? It's the bedrock of a good resume on how to write impactful statements. And last but not least, apply finishing touches, and I'll also show examples of what happens when you don't proofread your resume properly. Okay, and then tie it back to, remember, it's an impression you are forming to recruiters. Right, so we're going to do these different steps. Okay, so over here we have a job role here. This is for electrical engineer. We start with a technical role, right? So what are some skills that the hiring manager is looking out for? Right, so the job description really will give you a lot of clues. Okay, right? So here, coordinate with the maintenance team for turnaround planning and execution. Right, so what are they looking out for? Right, so they're looking out for skills like maybe project management. Okay, the next will be public speaking. Right, so to conduct technical training. So in terms of conducting training, right, there's a certain engagement involved, right? Just like what I'm doing here, right? I'm doing public speaking. Okay, so distill what are the skills that is required. Okay, so effective team player, right, with good communication skills. What are you looking out for? Collaboration. So have this in mind. Okay, of course, I only use 3 things as example. There are a lot of other things, perhaps more technical related, right? Like this measure root cause failure analysis here, right? Cost-effective solutions. Right? So all these are clues as to what the employer will look out for in your resume. Okay. So move on to something more generic. So this is a management associate program, MASH. So what are some skills that they're looking out here for? Right. So if you guys have done a certain amount of research into consulting, so as consultants, you'll go in and you will propose solutions sometimes, right? So that includes a certain amount of stakeholder management. So as part of your so-called looking at these skills, you just want to do research into the industry that you're looking out for. Okay? So it's not just looking at the JD and oh, okay, I just try and cut and paste things there. Right? So do a certain fair amount of research to tailor your job applications. Right? Cross-functional rotations. Right? So you know as part of the job, you're going to be rotated across different departments. So here it talks about doing claims. So claims is something more operational. Right? So you're likely to be talking about more efficiency processes, whereas cross-functional rotation business development, right? You're going to look at things like skills, like sales, like soft skills in customer and client engagement, right? Handling customer complaints, right? So they want a certain amount of what we can think of like adaptability as well. Okay, and cross-cultural competency, right? So they tell you here in the job description, right? You're going to, as part of the candidate, you're going to be exposed to international exchange program. But we're going to think about it. Why does the employer do that, right? Because they have a certain value. The company is probably MMC, right? They value candidates and they want a management trainees to be able to work across different cultures, right? And so they will expose them. So if you have some of these traits, right, and relevant experiences, right, make yourself very attractive to the employer. So this is what I mean by going down into the job one, going down into the nitty-gritties, right, and try to pivot, right, and then focus on these things so that your resume will stand out. Yeah, move on. Right, I think a lot of you mentioned in the survey form that you want to know a lot about ATS. So ATS and the AI and the kind of technology behind all this resume screening. So we're going to go through that. So ATS is a short form for applicant tracking system. A lot of different companies use it in different ways. So whatever they want to call it, using AI, machine learning, ATS, right? Don't be fearful of it. It's just about understanding it. So we're going to go through some popular platforms. Okay. So this is from Taleo. So Taleo is one of the more popular ATS systems out there. So what they will do is they will rank a person's profile according to the percentages. Right. So how do they come on these percentages? Right. It's basically what I just gone through. They look at a certain job role, it enters certain keyword functions. So if I want data analyst, I'll look for things like SQL, R, Tableau, data cleaning, for example. Right? So these are things that I would expect maybe a data analyst to perform. Right? And they'll rank the profiles accordingly. Right? So not only Taleo does that, right? All other different kind of ATS will kind of build in these things, right? But this is an example. Right, another simpler way Taleo does is quite no different from like your Excel filter function. For example, you put in, let's say maybe for a sales role, they want people to have their driving license. So right at the start of the applicant system, they put, do you have a driving license? Yes, no. If no, they'll filter out these candidates. Right. Another way companies can use that, it could be maybe by your honors degree. Right? So all these things, same kind of platform, but companies can use the same platform in different ways. Right? So you do need, I don't want to stress upon this again, you really do need to do a certain amount of research as to what companies are looking out for, because the platforms are the same. How the companies customize it, totally different. Right? I really have a lot of companies, Fortune 500 companies using this, right? You have companies like Tesla, Toyota, Boeing, more engineering related. You have fast-moving consumer goods like Johnson & Johnson, for retail and F&B, Starbucks and Nike. Right? You also have consulting firms like Deloitte using it, and of course financial services like Citi, Bank and Amex. Right? And how can you? Let's go to switch to my browser here. Right? Incidentally, NUS uses Taleo. Right? You see here, they'll brand themselves Taleo.net. Right? This came to me yesterday. I was going through the sites. I remember 4 years ago when I when I applied for NUS, right, it says powered by Taleo, right? So NUS reviews Taleo as well, right? And I'm going to sidetrack a bit, right? So I actually didn't have to go through Taleo. What happens for NUS, I was recommended in, right? So yes, there's a way to so-called understand and try to do well for your resume as well, right? But there's also another way you can just bypass all this, right? Is to get introductions for your job. So I highly encourage you guys to use your networks, right? Go through internships for conversion, and I'm sidetracking a bit, right? So see career prep, don't see career prep as in isolation. Oh, I just work on my resume and that's good. Right? So work on things like interviewing skills, your networking, and to that we have a whole host of workshops. Okay. So I'll move on. Right. So this is another system for job scan, right? So quite here, obviously here they've listed certain skills that they want in the resume, right? And then they will rank accordingly. Right. So this is an example of before ATS. For ATS, they will start to do like the traffic light system. So green is for things that they like, it's good. Right? Yellow is for things that's not so great. Right? Later I will go through what we have at NUS. We use this system called VMOC. We use a similar system of traffic light system as well. Right? So what they do is they will so-called show and highlight certain key things that the employer wants. Okay, we have another thing, LinkedIn, right? For those of you who don't have a LinkedIn account, we encourage you to perhaps try to get one just to see how these things work. Okay, so LinkedIn on the left, what you see here is your view, right? So on LinkedIn on the left, right, LinkedIn will sort of rank you accordingly to their own algorithm, right? So they match things on the current role, your skills, and your past experiences, right? On the right, sorry, again on the left, what you see things, certain skills that they want out of applicants, like business development, social media, marketing strategy, right? So those are highlighted, those things that you have, right? Those that are not highlighted, those things that you lack. So if you do have a LinkedIn account, you understand that people are asked to endorse certain skills. Okay, so for certain skills, you want to take note of the skill endorsement. It will feed. It will not only affect things like application, affect things of the kind of jobs that will feed into your LinkedIn profile. For example, for mine, I used to be from banking, so this people keep endorsing me for banking, so I still keep getting banking jobs, so I'm not interested in that. So, right, so I said, take note and understand the different platforms. It works differently. Okay. On the right, what you see here is what recruiters see. Okay. So you will see things like things like your past experiences. So you want to put relevant experiences to, and unfortunately, you sort of only can cater your profile one way. Okay, so things like recommendations will help to pull up your scoring, and recommendations will also will allow employees to click, and it's almost like a reference letter on its own, right? So recommendations help if you want to use LinkedIn to apply for jobs. Okay, so like I said, different profiles work differently. You just need to be able to know the different platforms. Okay, like I said, all this what you want to call ATS, AI, machine learning, it's technology. There's no need to fear it, right? In fact, you can use it to your advantage. So if you find it quite a chore to go through so much pros late at night, right? One way you can try that is quite creative is to create a word cloud. So we did that for this job description. So you see that, right? And using a word cloud, right? You distill certain keywords, and that will help you as well. Right? It's so much easier visually, right? I don't know about you guys, but I'm very much a visual person. This helps me a lot more. Okay, at this moment, I will just want to focus on something about skill sets. So we talk a lot about skills, right? So this is for the World Economic Forum. This is under their Future of Jobs report. So World Economic Forum, But what they do is they do a lot of research into the future skills that is relevant. But if you go and see here the top skills, this has not changed much in the last decade. But you don't see a lot of things like you don't see C programming, you don't see Python, right? I'm not saying that these technical skills are not important, right? So they are important. But if you want to so-called progress in your career, so these are feedback from top management, top recruiters, top HR personnel. Right? If you want to progress in your career, right, if you want to focus on these skills, right, and you see a lot of it are soft skills, things like people management, coordinating with others, negotiation, right, creativity. Okay. Right, so don't just go to the job description, go beyond that, right? Go and look at the organization, right? Things like industry trends, right? Go beyond the company website, right? If you need to talk to your seniors, or professors, right? Go to Glassdoor as well. Right? Go for recruitment events, hear it from the horse's mouth, right? And always it's always a learning journey. I think recently I just found out. So speaking to a student, so it's a company that uses ATS in a very strange way. So I'm not going to name the company. Let's say the company is, let's say for example, Pepsi. So Pepsi has a good culture of they don't really like to hire past employees. So what they do is they use ATS to search for that job search. So you search for a certain keyword, and the keyword is not a skill. It is basically the company name. So if you've been hired by that company before, they tend to not want to hire you again. Don't ask me why, it's just the organization culture. Right, I'll give you another example. For example, Microsoft. Microsoft believes very much in changing the world, and they have such a huge platform to do so, right? They are such a huge OS. Right? So they believe in changing the world. They focus a lot on who you are outside. They believe who you are outside of work determines on who you are at the core base, and that's how you are going to change the world. Okay. Similarly, for other organizations, let me just try to think here. Okay, yeah. So these are the examples I have in terms of organization, like culture. What I mean by okay. Remember another one, another story. So Google, not Google in Singapore, but Google in the United States. So they had a job ad. So basically, they used a billboard. I don't know if you guys know what billboard is. It's this large thing that you see in mostly in like countries like the United States. So they had in the billboard they had a quiz. So basically, if you solve that quiz, right, it will take you to round one of Google's interview. So that's what they did for one of the job ad, because they value things like curiosity. Right? That's one of their litmus tests for curiosity. Right? They did just a quiz on a billboard. Nobody knew what's Google. You answered it correctly, you go to the first round. Okay. So just elaborate on that. Right. So on you take a look at your own life experiences, right? And how can you distill some of these skills? So all of you are undergrads, you are postgrads, but most of you have done an internship. So internship is a good place to start building work experiences. Like temporary jobs as well. Some of you guys are in year one, you've not done your internship as well, but it is highly possible to get good working skills out of temp jobs. A student that did a lot of Excel skills, and she improved a lot of her Excel skills during her temporary job. She took the own initiative. The supervisor just gave her roughly a goal to do, right? And a lot of it she learned, right? Even during a temporary job. So temporary jobs are able to feature some of the skills that you can pick up as well. Right, personal projects. I've come across students. So I take charge of engineering students. So I've got students who invest on the sideline on their own. Doesn't have to be real money. Some of them they have play accounts, but it shows that curiosity and passion for the finance industry, right? And rightfully so, 20-30% of students do pivot there. Okay. Volunteering as well. I think volunteering shows effective time management, right? Nobody forces you to do this voluntary project, right? So volunteering can also come from things like your projects in your religious organizations, right? You can get skills from your voluntary experiences as well. Hobbies, right? Hobbies also are a good place to get some of these. think some of my students, they have, okay, I remember this story. There's this student of mine, she had a very specific genre. She liked Japanese detective novels and movies, right? And what she didn't realize, that was actually quite aligned to what she liked to do. So as engineers, she liked to do root cause failure analysis, which basically troubleshooting and problem solving to find root cause failures. Right? So actually her hobbies were very much in line with her own career goals as well. So it is possible as well. Competition, some of you will join hackathons, right? Some of you, it's a good way to present a real world solution to employers. Right? You actually, some of these competitions, you actually do present, there's actually a problem that a company wants to solve, right? And they just throw the problem out and see what some of the ideas, right? So competitions are a good place as well to list some of these skills. Right, your modules, that's quite straightforward. If you've taken relevant modules that's related to the employer, right, you can list them in your resume as well. Right, I kept not forgetting CCAs, right? And where you're going to get, it's a good place to get leadership skills. Right? As an intern, you're not likely to have leadership skills, right? But in your CCAs, you could be, let's say, in charge of marketing, you could be vice president, right? Yeah, so CCAs are a good place to get a lot of these soft skills. Okay, last but not least, it's not here, national service as well. This is applicable to male students from countries like Korea, Singapore, and I guess both male and female from students from Israel. Right. In Switzerland also has conscription, yeah. So national service also you can list by your experiences and skills there. Okay, I think this is quite straightforward, but I just want to expand on it. Okay. So putting all together, right, we use this concept called CAR statements. Okay, so for CAR statements, what does CAR stand for? CAR stands for competency. So competency, just very short, is the skill that you want to highlight to the employer, right? Action is summary of what you did, right? And results is what you achieve, right? Results can be quantifiable or qualifiable. Right, we're going to go in depth. CAR statements. Nothing proprietary to us. A lot of other unis use it as well, Harvard, but it is the bedrock of writing impactful statement in your resume. Okay, so let's go further in detail of CAR statements. Right, so you begin each bullet point with a strong competency verb. Right, so most of undergrads, right, there's no way that you have not done research or analyze something. Right, so research and analyze should be a competency verb that all undergrads here have. Okay, things like negotiated, right? Like you mentioned about marketing in your CCA, right? I negotiated for 5,000 worth of sponsorship. Okay, action, right, is a summary of how you carry out your duties, what your contributions and achievements were, right? And mention again results. Either you quantify, right? If the results are not tangible, how are you going to qualify? So one way is either share the rationale or purpose. Okay. So remember that as we go through the examples. Okay, before we go through the examples, right, we're going to give you guys a list of competency verbs. It's basically a cheat sheet, right? So I mentioned here before that about strong competency verbs. So what we want to use are, what we want to avoid then are weak competency verbs. So things like help, assisted, and participated are things you want to avoid. Competency verbs you want to avoid in your resume, right? So how else can you say help? Right, let's say you do voluntary work with NUS Enable, right? I familiarize incoming students with the NUS campus. Okay, maybe as part of your voluntary work, instead of saying I help underprivileged kids, right? I rehabilitated underprivileged youths, right, by giving them free tuition, something like that. So there are a lot of different ways you can describe. Rather than using just the word help. So I'm just giving one example, right? We use cheat sheet, go through it, right, and see how we can use stronger competency verbs. Right? You'll see later again in some of the examples. Right, so we'll focus on competency here in this slide. So led marketing initiatives on social media account. So instead of led, okay, so led, I would use it more for leadership skills, right? For example, in the national service, I led a team of 5, right, to execute anti-terrorist operations, right? So that makes more sense here, right? But if you want to talk about social media, right, and marketing, right, you might want to choose a different competency verb, right? So for example, here we use design and introduce. Like that might be a more appropriate competency verb in this instance, right? So go through your resume and this experience, right? Think how you can pivot, right? Looking at the job description that we mentioned in the earlier few slides, right? See how you can, right, pivot certain experiences. All right, so move on to actions. Okay, so we put here led marketing initiatives. But that doesn't really say much, right? So what sort of marketing initiatives? So maybe you want to elaborate a little bit, right? So customer interviews, product infographics, right? You can even elaborate on what social media account, right? Maybe I initiated the switch from Facebook to Telegram because Telegram is more for our target audience, for example. Okay, and results here are quite straightforward, right? Here we quantify increasing web traffic by, let's say, 10%, right? If you don't know it's a range, you can use a range, right? 10 to 15%, that's fine. Other ways besides percentages, it could be improving our grades, right? I taught tuition and I improved this person's grades from a C to a B. Okay, so those are quantifiable as well. Okay, what about results where it's qualifying? Right, so here instead created a database on 6 private higher education institutes across 6 states. So it doesn't state the purpose of what you created the database for. Right, so over here below is highlighted in yellow, right? So under a week, we did it under a week, so it talks about timeline. So, and we start to influence strategic decisions. That's for execution at the senior management level. So this is example of qualifying a result. Qualitative results. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. If you indulge me, I'm going to show you guys a live example. So FEA, if you're not material science or mechanical engineering background, right, you unlikely know what FEA is. Okay, but I'll show you once I'm done with this car statement, you will at least have some indication of what FEA is. Right, so what can we do here, right? If you have abbreviations, if it's not a common abbreviation, what you want to do is spell it out. So FEA stands for finite element analysis. But that still doesn't say much, right? So, like I said, if you don't have the word, you won't know what it is. Okay? Let's expand on. So, right, once you have this, right, I've stated, right, conduct finite element analysis. So what's it for? It's like you test certain metals, right? You know what aluminium is, aluminium foil, so people actually know what aluminiums are. Right? What is it the purpose for? Right? It's to stress test the strength of materials. Right? So a person will logically then be able to deduce that, all right, finite element analysis is to stress test the strength of materials. Okay. So moving on further, how can we improve on this more? Okay. So if I'm sending this to aviation employer, let's say to Boeing or to Rolls-Royce, or to Airbus, right? They should know what a fuselage is, right? But let's say even within engineering or out of engineering, if I don't know what a fuselage is, so remember at the start of my of this webinar, I mentioned always have the end user in mind. So how would I make this simpler for people to understand? But I'll change what a fuselage is. I can change it to aircraft body. Right? I think even primary school or secondary school person will know what aircraft body is. Right? So of course, to further improve it, it's content variable, right? Resulting right? So this is one example. Okay. So again, so how, let's say if I see a job description and it says analytical skills, right? I want to tell the employer, look, I've done something like that. I would flip it around, right? I could write something like analyze the strength of alumni. Thing. For the purpose of this, speed up finite element analysis. So it's very just choose the competency verb here. Okay, so this is what I mean by having the end user in mind, customizing your resume, right, applying CAR to it. So I show you guys a live example. Hopefully that puts it very clear. Okay, moving on.
Hi, Louis.
Yes.
Louis?
Yeah.
This is just Beer, your colleague. There was a question from a student at the very beginning that asked you, how are you able to come up with the numeric quantifiable figure? For example, increase efficiency by 90%. Could you share with students, common experiences that they may have, for example, their CCAs or their projects or the internships where they can then use numerical quantities to put under R in the CAR resume descriptors?
How are you able to come up with the numeric quantifiable figure? I guess it really depends, right? For example, if you are managing a social media account, they will have some of these insights and analytics on your account. Right? It could be maybe the followers, right? You started an Instagram account, it started off with maybe, or when you inherited the Instagram account, it only had 100 followers, right? But through your marketing efforts, you increased it to 1,000. So is that what the question is about?
Yeah, I think that's what the question was about. LXE, student name LXE, please let us know if you've answered your question. Maybe I can help a little bit more as well. So for example, many students are a part of CCAs, and in your role, your job might be to recruit more members. So if your CCA today has 10 students and by the end of your term, it has 20 students in the CCA, you can claim to have increased the attendance or registration by 100%. So that's something that you can report in your R under quantifiable result. Similarly, if you did an internship and you proposed a solution, and the boss went to take it to the customer, and the customer ended up buying the services, you can talk about the value that services brought. If you I think it's about identifying numerical ways to explain the work that you have done. Okay, if there are any other questions on that, I think you can ask, and Louis or any of my colleagues as well can answer it on the chat.
Yeah, I think I have another example I just thought of. So I think recently, it sounds quite common, your internships, you don't get to see the end of the project, right? But you can maybe say roughly a book, so this particular student, his job role was to so-called, was in an energy consultancy and was to so-called analyze certain businesses. So what he did in the quantifying was he stated the kind of how big these companies were, or how big these loans were. So I mean, as an intern, he never finalized the execution, right? They're not going to give it to the intern, but these were the things he analyzed. So for a loan quantity of maybe 300,000 to, let's say, 1 million, some of the companies he studied, right, were worth this amount, right? So that's another way of so-called trying to quantify some of the work, right? So this is work that you've done, just that you don't do the execution part. That's fine, right? But the work of researching these companies is still done. So that's another example I have. Okay, good question. Yeah, I think yeah. So I think where students always have difficulty is trying to either quantify or qualify results. So that's why I go through an example, right? But it really gets better with practice. So I hope that you guys go back and spend time on recrafting this. We do the same thing as well, even for ourselves. We haven't done this for many years. I still relook at my car statements, right, and see how I can prove them. I relook at students' ones. Right, some of you guys, if you have been, sometimes I think of something and then I email you guys much later. It happens. Okay, so treat it as a craft, continue to get better at it. Okay, so once you've crafted in all the car statements, so move on to applying finishing touches. Right, so a clean, we really recommend a clean template. It's fine. So avoid like images and graphics. Right, use Microsoft Word as far as possible. If you need, save it your PDF. Just save it with your full name. Right, this happens to us. Right? You guys send me a resume version 1, resume ABC. So I have on my desktop. I'm trying to save it as a recruiter. Everybody calls it resume, right? So save it. Right, resume Rachel Lim, Lim. Right, some students will go resume Louis Lim for Halliburton. Say. Use clean, readable fonts, so things like Times New Roman, Arial, Calibri, right? These are readable font. Preferably 11 or 12. I would say smallest is 10, 9. Some of you guys use 9. It's really a bit too small. I got to know a lot of these recruitment people are not young, right? They're older folk like myself, so really try not to go beyond that. Yes, Simon, for fresh grads, stick to a maximum of 2 pages. Maximum, don't go beyond that, right? Most employers have really, in fact, yeah, I would say 99% of employers right there, 1 to 2 pages max. Okay. That being said, I talk about researching for certain roles. So for management consultancies, in fact, it's even stricter. Strictly, most of them really accept only a 1 page. Maybe Jasper can comment on that. Jasper used to be in consulting, right? So, but most of employers have indicators 1 to 2 pages max. Right? And really, 1 page is something. The first page is really things that are relevant to the employer. Okay, I'll give you a very extreme example. Right, today you're applying for Outward Bound School. Right, you see the Outward Bound School JD. It says strong CCAs. They don't talk much about academics. They talk about strong CCAs. So if you know you're going to apply for a role like Outward Bound School, right? So I know in our template we put CCAs behind, right? But you don't have to be typecast by these things, right? So these you need to be able to apply these concepts as well. So let's say you go apply for Outward Bound School, right? Shift the template, shift your CCA up, because that's what the employer wants to see. So that's what I mean by looking at the JD. Okay. So keep it simple and readable. So I know today you can get one of these templates on Canva, right? They produce these ready-made templates. Really not necessary unless, right, the carrot here, right, going for a more design-centric, a more marketing role, right? My fiance is in marketing. For her industry, right, it has to be something like that, right? Shows your creativity and everything. But by and large, most other industries, right, keep it clean, keep it simple. Okay. So your structure of the resume should have your name and contact details. Right, this student, for the first 3 weeks, you're sending out resumes, he realized his contact details were incorrect. So there you go, 3 weeks worth of applications gone down the drain. So make sure you proofread your resume. Right? Have an education section, work experience, CCAs, academic projects for some of you guys, skills and interest section. That's what we minimally recommend. If you have a link to your LinkedIn, to some of you guys from STE or engineering, you have a portfolio, right? Link to a portfolio, you can include it in your resume as well, so that if the recruiter needs to, you click it, it will go into your portfolios of projects. Right? So make sure your date formatting is consistent in reverse chronological order, right? So you have month and year both indicated. You can do it. So it is be consistent. If you're doing it in so-called 3-letter, right? Don't so be consistent. JUL, right? MAY, May, but don't do JULY and then for May is 3 and then January and then income. So make sure that your date formatting is inconsistent. Sorry, it's consistent. Okay. Some of you guys, you don't. I don't know if you don't remember experiences or what. You just put the year only. I would really frown upon that because just putting the year, for me the impression it gives me is like, oh, you don't seem to know your own life experiences very well. I have some doubts on the validity of these experiences that you put in. Okay, so reverse chronological order. Okay, so why do we talk about applying finishing touches and proofreading a resume? So these are examples of my own students when they send it to me. Like I said, right from the very beginning, right, how long does it take to form an impression? So what resumes you send, right, creates the impression. Right. So over here you see Bachelor in Mechanical Engineering. So Bachelor is spelled wrongly. Okay. So our VMOC managed to pick this up, so it highlights it in yellow, but because it's in cap, right, it indicates it's not in red yet. Okay, so really look at your spelling. Okay, avoid things like self-rating. Okay, so this is made famous by, nothing against Elon Musk, right? This is one of the resumes out there, he self-rates himself, right? Again, Elon Musk is CEO, he doesn't need to find a job. He can write whatever he wants in the resume. Right? So show evidence rather than self-rate. Right? If you want to talk about a certain competency like Python, right, you put a basic, expert, it's fine. Anyway, for these technical competencies, if the employer wants to test it, they will do a technical test anyway. Okay, we're using templates, right? This is called apply the template but never apply the brains, right? LinkedIn, put new. If you don't have, just delete away the icon. Again, right, we give you guys a template and you don't clean it up. Okay, insert valuable course modules taken. Again, it's a template. And make sure that you delete all these instructions that we have. So this one, so again, what we have here is learn to create most. It doesn't make sense, right? You're sending, and so I don't know whether the student didn't proofread the resume or just has bad command of English. But if really you're not a native speaker of English, you have problems, difficulties, right? Get a friend, get a career advisor to improve on your resume. Okay. And this inefficient use of space, right? So if you see on the right hand side, it's such a big white space. Right? You really only have 2 pages max, right? So what you can do actually is move up, right? Comma, programming material, comma, strength of materials, comma, fluid mechanics. So you can move up and you can actually save space. Right? So avoid white spaces in your resume. Okay. You happen to recognize this, your friends anyway. I'm sorry, I really tried to normalize the data. It's just for learning purposes. So resume checklist, right? These are things that really never grow old. Okay. Tailor your resume for the jobs that you're applying for. Right? Use impactful cast statements where possible, so avoid things like pronouns. I cannot further emphasize, check for spelling and grammar. Right? It's the first impression that you give to recruiters. Okay, ensure things like your font, structure, format are neat and consistent. And I can keep saying this the cows come home, and I swear it will still have it. I'm not immune to this. It happens to me as well. Okay, so proofread the resume. It's almost psychological. You keep reading your own thing, you can't spot your own mistakes. Right, so I think it's just good practice. Read your own PowerPoints, your own email. Right, just have a good, if possible, sending your work for people for a second look. Okay. So recap, right, what we've gone through for resume, identify skills from the job description, and I mentioned go beyond the job description as well, do your own research, right? List relevant examples from life experiences. We've talked about the more obvious, like your projects, your internships, right? But things like your voluntary experiences, national service, right, can also count. Okay, demonstrate your competencies in the CAR format. Right? We'll be providing some material for you guys as well. There's the competency verb cheat sheet. And last and certainly, the apply finishing touches. I mentioned about things like inputting your incorrect contact details, right? And the impression that you want to give employees if you have spelling errors. Okay, I'm going to run through VMOC. So VMOC is what? So every matriculated student should have a VMOC account. Okay, so when you enter VMOC, right, make sure you go to the right one. vmoc.com/NUS will give you the correct links. You should show the NUS logo, log in with your university ID, you should ask for two-factor authentication. You should be going through the same process as well. Okay, so this is my account. I've uploaded a resume inside already. So, like I said, if you remember, remember the earlier slide on the ATS, it goes by a traffic system. So VMOC works that way as well. So green means good job, yellow means on track, red means it's work. Right? We've broken it down to things like impact. So presentation is things like a format and competency. So these are common things that they've done the research, and these are what employees typically look up for fresh graduates. So you can click on the detailed feedback. Right, and it starts to go into specifics. Right, so it says here, right, could be numbers or metrics depending on scope. Let's look at the rate here, right, to avoid same words that repeatedly describe your experience, right, avoiding filler words as well. Okay, overall format, section, spell check, right, so it gives you, and you can go in further again. So impact. So obviously this is a resume that we made mistakes on. So we kept using the word optimize. Right, points it out. Okay, so try to vary some of the experiences that we have. Okay. Avoid filler words. Avoid things like pronouns. Right. So you can do plan, executed, tailored curriculum for students. Right. To enhance learning experiences. Full stop. You don't need to put their. Okay. So a presentation, right? We've programmed VMOC. So many companies, if you upload VMOC on the open, it's going to function a bit differently. Like I said, right? All these ATS, all these systems, right? It depends on the algorithm. So we set it. So we set it to a max of 2 pages only. Right? So this is how VMOC score your resume. Things like bulleting, section specific, font, spelling mistakes, right? We made one. So, but there's other things that the computer is really good at, right? Number one, you upload your resume at 2 a.m., it's going to respond to you. Like you email me at 2 a.m., I'm not going to respond to you, I'm sleeping. Okay? Another thing it's really, really good at, right, is spotting spelling errors. I could have missed that on the naked eye. You could have missed that, right? But the computer usually doesn't miss spelling mistakes. Okay, so the things that it's good at, right? But it doesn't take away the human element. VMOC cannot tell you, oh, for this job description, your resume is great. Right? It doesn't do that. You will need to still look at the job description and customize your resume accordingly. So there are things that it's good at, right? And leverage on these things that VMOC is good at. Okay. For competencies, talk about analytical skills. So these are the common things that employers usually look out for, right? And then you can really click on insights, right? Tells you, let's say for initiative, but how could you improve on initiative? Right? I could have mentored. I took the initiative to mentor new members, right? In the engine club, for example. Okay, it could be training, people development, right? Counseling. These are ways that you can display initiative. Right? So really is quite useful. Okay, so go ahead and try that. Students are allowed 10 uploads per academic semester. Okay, it's okay. We're still rather good on time. I'll go and cover letter. Hopefully, we have time for a bit of Q&A. So, how is the cover letter different from a resume? Right. In short, it's a persuasive piece that allows you to express things like motivation, show why you're a good fit, right? Show how your interests and values align with the organization. Right? For example, what can you express in a cover letter, right? Rather than put, I read with interest of this job description, right? I attended the recruitment event by PSA, and I'm really interested in the port consolidation project mentioned during recruitment, right? So it immediately indicates to the employer a certain interest and passion that, look, you attended my recruitment talk. Okay. For example, maybe they're looking at resilience. So maybe as part of your project, maybe you build a unmanned aerial drone, right? And as part of that project, right, the drone crashed 17 times before you finally managed to get it to work. Each time it crashed, you went back to the firewall. So these are things you can elaborate more on a cover letter. Okay, so is it necessary? It's like I mentioned, elaborated on, right? It indicates passion, it shows initiative. You can add a bit of personality to it. For some employers, right, it is almost certainly they're assessing your writing skills. Right? So as far possible, right, try to include a cover letter. Right? Most definitely, if they ask for it, please do include it. Listen to instructions when you're doing for the job application. But I fully understand sometimes you're in your final year, you're rushing your project, you're trying to pull up your CAP score. If you're really in a rush for time, I would say that at least just send out your application first. Okay. So if you want to break it down simpler, right, cover letter is the high. So things like contact details never change, right, the company, so make sure you amend it accordingly. You're likely to have 5 or 6 drafts, right? Each time you cut and paste. So make sure you cut and paste correctly. Always double check things like the application. I've done this silly mistake before. I applied for company A and company B. They are both competitors. Right? For company B, I put company A's name and position. That's good. That's my application. After doing my resume, because of this cover letter mistake, down the drain, first impressions, right? So make sure you proofread your cover letters as well, right? So in the first paragraph is the one you probably customize the most, right? Introduce yourself and share your motivation on why you want to join the company or the industry. Okay? Next two paragraphs, to three paragraphs, you can highlight certain skills. Again, depending, matching the JDs, right? Supported by specific examples. Kind of like showing results in your cover letter. Okay. So of course, throughout the course, I would encourage students to have a few drafts. So maybe they feature engineering skills, they feature business development, soft skills, or you just basically more or less cut and paste these paragraphs. Okay. Paragraph 3 is the thing that never changes at all. I attach is my resume. I look forward to hearing a favorable reply from you. I can be contacted at contact details. So paragraph 3, but definitely, mostly doesn't change. Okay, so nothing more than a page, simple readable font, free from spelling mistakes and grammatical errors. Okay, so let's take a look at example here. We have a generic job description here from Tan Tok Sing, right? So that's the JD, that's what's written, right? So what do you think of the paragraph here? I'll read it out. My research and internship experiences train me to be humble as I strive to learn continuously. From my research projects, I have learned to adopt a logical yet creative mindset in problem solving. I've also honed my verbal and communication skills. Right, so nothing wrong. There's no spelling error or grammatical error. So it's not a trick question, but basically he's sort of just cut and paste stuff that he found on the JD and list it there, but without actually really elaborating on how has he displayed his skills. Right. So look at this example, right? So much more detailed and really demonstrates the skill. Right? I've developed strong communication skills, both written and oral, through the various research projects and internships I've undertaken in the university. During the past 4 years, I've produced close to 30 forms of written communication, including essays, reports, right, thesis, posters, presentation slides. So these experiences not only hone my ability to write in a clear and concise manner, but train me to tailor my style of writing according to the needs of the target recipient. You can see here it's so much more better, so much better written. You can really display that kind of experiences. Of course, whatever you write, be prepared to back it up when during the interview when they ask these things. So some common mistakes, right? Stating the obvious, or like some people think, oh, I should suck up to the recruiter. Not necessary. Right? If I'm DBS, I mean, you tell me, oh, you're the leading bank in Asia. I'm DBS, I know that myself. Right? If you're, Singtel is the largest telco in Singapore, I would be really honored to be part of Singtel. I'm Singtel, no shit, so I don't need you to tell me that I am the largest telco in Singapore. I know that myself. Right? Some students will focus too much on themselves. Oh, I read that your company has great training opportunities. I would like to benefit from that. But you're not showing me what value you can add. As a recruiter and employer, I know, yes, my company provides great management training experience, right? But what can you do? Right? It's more important. Think of self-doubt. Some of the common things I've experienced. Some of my students are double majors, let's say in business and engineering. So let's say for data analytics role here, although my in terms of financial analytics is not as good as a business student, but why would you start like that? Right? You would say that as an engineer, we are numerically and analytically very competent. It's part of our training as an engineer. So I train in this rather than, oh, I do not have. It's shooting yourself in the foot, right? It's almost like writing, oh, I'm interested in data analytics, but I don't really like to deal with data. Doesn't make sense. Okay? Not showing initiative, not taking ownership. We see that sometimes in like during your internship, when you write about your internship experience or national service, right? I was tasked to, I was asked to. It's almost like you're forced to. Yes, having gone through national service, I would admit a certain part of it is you are being forced to do things, but you don't have to write it that way, right? I led my team to do this. Rather than I was tasked to, I was asked to. Okay? These are some common errors. Okay, I think with that, I've come to the end. We'll do we have a bit of time to do Q&A, 10-15 minutes. Meanwhile, we really appreciate your feedback. This is the first run. Really not much experiences doing online webinars. Let us know how we can improve the content. If there are ways we can improve things like building rapport, having a bit more better chat moderation, right? So we are learning along the way as well. So do be patient. First, right? COVID-19 has thrown us into this situation where we have to use these digital platforms and really try to improve and get a good experience to the students. There's a way I can.安迪，所以我在玩，你等下回来。
隔壁可以吗？你的老板？
我等下给你开了，可以吗？对不起。
你现在忙
好，对不起。
我去扫书。
好，谢谢你啊，安迪。Okay, sorry, I wanted that.
Hi, Lewis.
Hey,
I think there were some students asking you some questions on the chat. Are you able
yeah,
to see it?
I went to edit the slides and I lost the chat. Wait,
Okay, I can read it out.
yeah.
Okay, there was a question
Okay, I
about
see the
white
chat again.
space.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right.
Which one is it? Thank you.
All right, there's a question here from Jay. You discourage the use of white space in our resume to better utilize the 1-2 page limit. But is
Yes.
that subjective to the field we are applying for, i.e. for design, or that is for design? I read somewhere that white space and bullet points can help with readability rather than cramming everything into a single sentence.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned, if you're going for like design or marketing centric roles where the format needs to be unique and all these, then go ahead. Yeah, so it's what we're saying, what we provide advice is in general, we are trying to avoid white space. But if you feel that for that certain amount of role, you want to focus more on the outlook of your template and the design, then yeah, by all means go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a good guide is to avoid like a completely crammed resume. There should at least be
Yeah, on the
between
other end, you also don't want to
experiences.
try
Yeah.
to cram everything. Yeah, so on the reverse end, don't go into either extreme ends. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, we've seen students who have extremely narrow margins and then no spaces between sections, and that's really hard to read as well.
I like font size 8 and everything.
Yeah, I think 10
if
is
you
a
find that
minimum.
you have too much, sometimes you just have to make that cut. Like, give example, this student was a polymath, a really accomplished, crazy. He's like a professional musician, and there's really more than 2 pages we can fit in his life story, and we just had to make very painful cuts. So things like eventually I told him, you know what, you have to take out the professional musician, because what does it mean to the engineering employer? It doesn't mean much. Yeah, so we took that out. Another student, he's dragon boat since secondary 2 to NUS. True, he has a lot of experience dragon boating, yeah, but it doesn't need to be half a page, right? So we reduced that to like 3-4 key achievements, right? Like school team and national team from age whatever to whatever. So instead of having 4 sentences, oh, I'm this secondary school team, this JC school team, right? We just push it all